Hi, it's Todd with Kudas Industries. Today's video is about replacing a screen. This one happens to be on a sliding patio door, but you could also apply these techniques to a window screen or storm door as well.
I have 5 basic tools here. Really sharp utility knife, flathead screwdriver, sharp nose pliers, and then a screen replacement tool. This one has a groove on the roller, so that groove pushes the caulking into the window frame. It actually has a knife on the other end that extends out. It's a hook blade knife. I typically don't use those because they tend to pull the screen. I just like a regular sharp utility knife. And then a straight edge for making cuts. So here's my broken screen. You can see at the bottom there it's ripped pretty good. So we're going to replace this. But you'll notice that I'm working on a plywood floor. The reason for that is I want to protect the metal painted surface of the frame. I'm going to be putting some pretty good downward pressure on the frame during this whole process, so I don't want to have that frame rub against any kind of abrasive, concrete, driveway, sidewalk, garage floor, and scratch up the paint. So I put it on plywood. Some people will set up a pair of sawhorses with a piece of plywood on top and then kind of work at waist level. Here I have a nice plywood floor available, so I just put it right on the floor. If you don't have any plywood floor or sawhorses, what you could do is actually put down a blanket on your garage floor, sidewalk, driveway, and then put the door on top of the blanket just to protect that surface, because you don't want to get it all scratched up. You don't want to have a nice new screen and then your frame's all scratched from putting it in. So that's why it's on the plywood. So first step, of course, is to take out the old screen, and I just used that flathead screwdriver to kind of pick out the corner and then pull up on the rubber that holds the screen in. You'll see it's a little bead of rubber, probably about an 1/8 inch diameter typically. And I'll just pry that corner up and then rip it out with a pair of sharp nose pliers. But I usually reuse those. Some people will replace that piece of rubber that holds the screen into the frame, but I've found that I can typically reuse them if they're in good shape. If they come out in one long piece intact, I'll usually just put it right back in. So again, this is just taking out the rubber. See, I started in the corner there, picked it up with the screwdriver. There's the piece of rubber. I'm grabbing it right now, just kind of ripping that out from around the edge. And I'll just do this all the way around. The bottom of this particular frame, somebody tried to repair this before. They put some kind of putty or glue in there, and I really had to dig that out because the whatever they had put in there previously really hardened up. It's almost like a really hard putty, so that's why I was picking away at that with the screwdriver. So I got 2 sides out. Now I'm going to go after that third and fourth side here. So that corner kind of gave me some trouble. I had to get the hook of the blade to try to pry that up and get the screwdriver in there. But I eventually got it with the sharp nose pliers and the screwdriver and peeled that out. And you see I just rip out the remainder of the screen. Here comes the last piece. So just rip that out, and once that out, get that frame out of the way and kind of tip it over and dump out any extra and clean up the grooves as best you can. So I got the screen out, and then I'm working on that bottom groove that had the putty in it. I'm really trying to clean that out and straighten it up. That groove is what holds your caulking into place, so I want to make sure that's as clean as possible, to make sure that that screen doesn't pop out. The screen I use in this particular replacement is a pet resistant screen, 36 by 84 standard size. This customer had a couple small dogs, and I wanted to give them something a little bit stronger. So this screen's heavier duty. It doesn't make it that much harder to see through, even though it's a thicker screen material, but it does really good against like claws and kind of pets pawing at it. So I'll get this laid out here. As you'll see, I kind of roll it out. I roll it out so the curl is facing down. If you roll it with the curl facing up, it tends to curl back up. So I roll it like that, the curl facing downwards. And what I'll do is I'll just stretch it out here amongst the whole door and get that end overlapped past the frame, just like that. So if extra material, all that extra material is going to get cut off at the end once it's all caulked in. And you'll notice here I line up 2 edges just almost flush with the top of the groove, and the reason I do that is that it cuts down on how much I have to trim off. So if I get the top and the one side caulked in there perfectly, I don't have to do any trimming. I just have to trim the other side and the bottom. Now, if you're new to this, please, you'll want to have material all the way around excess, caulk it in, and then you'll just trim off all the way around. I take a little bit of a shortcut. Again, I'll just line that screen up, just covering the groove, maybe an 1/8 inch past the groove on top. And whenever I put that rubber caulking in there, it'll actually suck that into the groove and make it so the screen material is just below the face of the frame. So again, I'm getting this lined up. Then I'll get my installation tool, make sure the knife is closed on the end. I don't want to stab myself. And then I'll lay out the existing piece of rubber right there. And I just start in the corner, hold it in place, and just start gentle pressure at first just to get it started. You see I'm pressing down there. Again, this is heavier duty screen material, so I gotta press a little bit harder. And I just work it. So I'll work a little bit at a time, maybe a few inches, and then as I'm working that piece of rubber into the groove, it's actually pulling the screen material into the groove, and it'll come off the face if you have it overlap the face a little bit. So I'll do this all the way around. See, I'm just working it a little bit there and continue all the way around. So some of this can be stubborn to get started. This actually wasn't terrible. I'll show you a close up here. So see where my tip of my finger is? When I overlap the edge, I go right to that edge, or maybe an 1/8 inch more. And then if I do that on the edges, I'm not going to cut. That'll pull the material right in. Here's the tool. That is the rubber piece that I'm pointing to. That's the caulking strip, I call it. And then there's the groove on the tool. Goes right on top of that rubber and pushes it in. Gentle at first, and then put some pretty good pressure and push it right down. You got to be careful with the tool though. You don't want to be on the screen itself because it'll cut through it if you press down too hard, or you don't want to be on the frame because that'll actually cut through the material and make another hole. So right on top of the rubber, you just push down and work it nice and back and forth. So back to the top. So I'm working it there, starting from the corner, keeping that edge overlap the groove, just about an 1/8 inch past on top of the surface. For me, I don't want to, again, I'm not going to cut this edge. Whenever I push that screen material into the groove, it's going to suck down in, and that'll be perfect. I won't have to cut the top or the one side. So just try to line it up, working that piece of rubber in there, pushing it down. You see, if you got to pull that rubber caulking back to stretch out a piece, go ahead and do it, because you got to have this perfect. What I usually do is I look at the lines on the screen and I try to line up one of the lines with the frame all the way across. It makes it nice and straight. And I'll do that on both ends. I'll pick a row, line it up with the frame, and make sure that row is on the edge of the frame the whole way across, just so it's straight. Now on the other end, you'll see I just tensioned this by hand. Some people actually, they'll wrap that screen around a piece of 2x4 and then push the 2x4 kind of lever against the bottom of the frame to pull that screen super tight. I don't like to do that. I've had trouble in the past where it actually twists the frame, and it could actually distort the frame if you pull that screen too hard. So I just pull it by hand. A little light tension on it. You'd be surprised how much tension goes onto the material once you push it down into the groove. It almost like self-tensions. So again, I just work the bottom, try to make it as straight as possible. You'll see there's grooves or waves, if you will, on the top of the screen material. That'll go away whenever I do the sides. So again, the bottom's done. So here's that side. I'm not going to trim this side. So again, I lined it up, starting in the corner, just kind of working a little bit at a time, right? Maybe a couple inches back and forth. You'll see how some of those waves are already coming out of the screen, because when you push that screen material into the groove, it really makes it tight. And you don't want that screen material to be like a drum. That's too tight. I like a little bit of play in it, a little bit of deflection. So I got 3 sides done here. Here's my last side. Again, this corner, I always start in the corners. So I'll start working it, and I'm pulling it with my left hand. You got the tool in my right hand, so I'm just a little bit of tension. See that there? Just pulling it, and see how tight that's getting. Once you push that screen into that groove, it really tightens up really nice. So again, just pull with my one hand, roll with the other. If you have somebody helping you, they could pull, they could tug a little bit on the screen, and you could roll it in if you need to put two hands on the tool. I'm working around the handle right now. Sometimes those areas are a little bit tricky, um, and sometimes I have to go back. So I might have to take the rubber back out and start tensioning or pulling on the screen a little bit, and then rolling that tool in there with the rubber. So here we go. We're almost there, getting towards the end. The further you get, it kind of does get easier. And you see how smooth it is. Pretty much all those waves came out. Whenever I get to the bottom, you'll see that screen is. I think it's tensioned perfectly. It's not too tight. It's not loose at all. I mean, it's a good stiffness. So there you go. Now that the screen's all in, next part's to cut off the excess. So I'll get a utility knife and a straight edge. Make sure you get a really sharp blade. It'll save you in the long run, make this a lot easier. If you have the type of utility knife where you could snap off the end and it gives you a fresh blade, go ahead and do that. So I'll start in the corner again, put my straight edge right on top of that piece of rubber at a slight angle and use that as a guide. And I'm cutting right against the metal frame there. You'll see in the bottom I freehand as well sometimes, but on these long edges, sometimes that metal ruler just makes it easier. Just run the blade against it, right against the frame, gives you a nice straight cut right on top of the rubber. That bottom edge is kind of messed up, so I just freehand it. Again, starting the corner. As I'm cutting, I'm putting that blade almost on top of the rubber piece and then cutting and peeling back with the other hand and then working the corners. So after it's all cut, I'll take the installation tool and roll the edges one more time. Sometimes you have to use a screwdriver in the edges and the corners just to push it in because that wheel won't go all the way to the corner. So just use that flat-headed screwdriver to push those corners right in. And then you might have a little extra piece of rubber you have to cut off. Just take your knife and slice off that piece of rubber. Just go around it one more time, and you'll see here I just kind of working it in, make sure it's nice and tight. You see how those waves came out? So it's pretty taut, and I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. So I hope you liked the video. Let me know if you have any comments down below. Subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to showing you some other things in some other videos.